The wind over Dust Creek carried more than sand, it carried laughter. Ugly, jeering laughter that stung worse than any whip. And in the middle of it all stood Elid Welv, wiry, his knuckles raw from scrubbing stalls that reeked of sweat and sorrow. The other stable, hands-full-blooded white sons of ranchers and rough men mocked him without mercy. "Hey, rice boy," one sneered, flinging a shovel of horse manure dangerously close. "Ain't your kind supposed to be good with their hands? Then fix this mess." The others laughed, loud and cruel. Eli didn't flinch. Not this time. He simply turned his back and kept brushing down the mare. Her name was Angleblind in one eye, cast out like him, but gentle in the way only broken things could be. He didn't know his father's name. He only knew he'd come from Guangdong with nothing but a scar and a hammer, then vanished into the railroad dust before Eli ever took his first breath. His mother, a laundress who died coughing blood into linens that never stayed white, left him with nothing but silence. So the boy with no name endured. Until the day Mr. Granger, the reclusive owner of Black Ridge Ranch, rode in on a black Mustang, dismounted without a word, and walked straight toward the commotion. "What's this?" the rancher growled, voice like boot leather soaked in whiskey. Silence fell. A shovel clanged to the floor. Eli stood there, half-hunched, expecting the same lecture, or worse. But Granger's eyes didn't hold judgment. They held something heavier recognition. "What's your name, boy?" Eli blinked. The question struck harder than any insult. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was, he didn't have one note really. Folks called him that half-chin stable rat, or the slant-eyed runt. Even his mother had just called him boy. "Don't got one, sir," he mumbled. The old man tilted his head. "You do now. Your name's Eli. Eli Granger. You work for this ranch. You wear that name with pride. Anyone don't like it, they can find another trough to drink from." The world seemed to slow. Even the flies buzzing over the trough went quiet. Eli's heart thudded in his ears. A name. A real name. And one shared with the most feared and respected man in 5 counties. From that moment, everything changed, but not for the better, not yet. The other stable hands didn't take kindly to Granger's gesture. Where once there was mockery, now there was malice. One night, they cornered Eli behind the hay barn, ropes in hand, grins too wide to be friendly. "Think you're one of us now, huh?" growled Clay Murdoch, the ranch foreman's nephew. "Got yourself a white name, so now you walk tall?" Eli didn't answer. He just backed up until his heels hit the fence. Clay cracked his knuckles. "Time to knock the pride out of you." They shoved him, spat at him, dragged him through the muck. One cut a lock of his hair. Another branded a slur into the side of his bunk with a hot poker. Eli never fought back. He bore it like iron in a forge, clenched and silent. But one night, they went too far. A mare went into labor. Angel, his angel. He'd raised her since she was barely more than a skeleton, trained her hands-on, taught her to trust again. But Clay, jealous of the bond, locked Eli in the grain shed during the storm. Eli pounded on the door, voice hoarse with fear. "She's birthing, please! She won't make it alone!" No one came. By the time Granger found him the next morning, the filly was dead. Angel lay beside her, eyes wide with a grief no animal should bear. Granger didn't say a word. He just stared at Eli, covered in splinters and dust, and said coldly, "Who did this?" Eli shook his head. "Doesn't matter, sir." But it did. The old man saw it in his eyes. Things spiraled from there. Granger, sensing rot in the ranks, began making changes. Men were reassigned. Clay lost his post near the horses. Whispers traveled fast. The China boy was the reason. Tensions rose. One morning, someone painted "Filth bleeds filth" in red across the barn doors. Eli scrubbed it off before sunrise. He didn't want Granger to see, though the rancher probably already knew. And then came the rustlers. They came at dusk, 6 riders, cloaked in dust and desperation. Bandanas masked their faces, rifles swung low. They didn't bother with stealth. They knew the ranch was divided, its men distracted. Granger was away in town. That left Clay angry, resentful, itching for a reason to assert control. He barked orders without strategy, sending ranch hands scattering like startled deer. In the chaos, Eli saw what others missed. The rustlers weren't aiming to steal horses, they were here for the ledgers. The Granger brand was expanding, buying up territory. The wrong people had taken notice. Amid the gunshots and smoke, Eli slipped into the main house, ducking past broken windows and fallen portraits. He found the office ransacked, papers scattered, strongbox pried open. But there, half buried beneath overturned furniture, he found a satchel stamped with Granger's seal. Inside, deeds, bank drafts, letters enough to ruin a legacy if they got out. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. A rustler burst in, rifle raised. Eli didn't think. He flung the satchel through the open window and dove after it, crashing into the hedges below. He hit the ground hard, ribs bruising against dirt and stone, but he never let go of the satchel. By the time Granger returned, 2 men were dead, 3 wounded, and the rustlers gone. The office was in ruins, but the satchel was safe. Granger stood over the boy that night, silent in the flickering lamplight. Eli's arm was in a sling, lip split, shirt soaked with sweat and dried blood. "You saved my land," Granger said, voice rough. Eli didn't meet his eyes. "It wasn't just yours." Granger gave a single nod. "It is now." 3 months passed. The ranch healed slowly, fences mended, stalls rebuilt, and men replaced. Eli worked without complaint, always before dawn, always after dusk. But he walked straighter now. When the new hires asked who he was, the answer was simple. "Name's Eli Granger. I work the stables." But not everyone forgot. Clay Murdoch nursed his wounds in silence. Demoted, disgraced, stripped of his horseman's gloves, and reassigned to mucking pig pens, he simmered like coal beneath ash. What burned hotter than shame was fear that the boy he'd once mocked now stood closer to power than he ever would. One Sunday morning, a letter arrived by courier. It was addressed to Eli, which caused more than a few side eyes. No one ever wrote to stable hands. He opened it behind the tack room, fingers trembling. Inside was a single sheet, ink bold, words few. "Your father's name was Lu Sheng. I knew him. Meet me at Widow's Bluff sundown. Come alone." There was no signature. Eli folded the note carefully, tucked it beneath his belt, and said nothing. That night, he slipped out after chores, walking west under a bleeding sky. Widow's Bluff was a half-hour ride, but Eli went on foot. He needed the silence. He needed the questions to gather in his chest like thunder. Who sent it? Why now? He reached the ridge just as the sun fell behind the hills. The land burned gold and purple, the canyon below swallowing light. A figure stood near the edge, a woman, cloaked and motionless. "You came," she said without turning. "Are you the one who sent the letter?" She nodded, then removed her hood. Her face was thin, weathered, Chinese like his. Her eyes sharp, stormy, and full of memory scanned his face. "You look like him," she whispered. Eli stepped closer. "You knew my father?" She nodded again. "He wasn't just a railroad man. He was a fighter. Organized protests, spoke out. That's why they killed him." The words hit like a pistol crack. Killed? They made it look like he vanished, she said bitterly, but he died chained inside a mine shaft that caved in under dynamite. They buried the truth in his body with it. Eli's throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because the man who ordered it now owns part of this land. He's Granger's new partner. Eli staggered back a step. That can't be right. Mr. Granger wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Her voice sharpened. Wouldn't strike deals with devils if it saved his ranch? You think power makes men pure? The canyon wind howled between them, pulling the silence tight. Eli looked down at his hand, calloused, scarred, trembling. He'd spent so long carving an identity from labor, loyalty, and the few kind words the old rancher ever gave him. Could it all be built on a lie? The woman handed him a faded photograph of his father, young and stern, standing beside a group of miners with soot-streaked faces. On the back, names were scribbled in English. One leapt out, E. Granger. He was there, she said. He signed off on the mine contract. I found records buried in county archives proof. I'd been following the trail for years, and now it leads to you. Why me? Because your father believed names matter, and someone gave you his. The sun was gone now. Night crept up the canyon wall, swallowing color. Eli tucked the photo into his pocket. He didn't speak. He just walked. All the way back to Black Ridge Ranch. By morning, the air had changed. Granger returned that day with a guest, Henry Lovell, a silver-toothed businessman in a silk vest and gleaming boots. Men stepped aside when he passed, but Eli didn't. He stood in front of the corral, arms crossed, eyes steady. Granger approached. Something on your mind, son? Eli held up the photograph. You knew my father. Granger's jaw stiffened. I knew a lot of men. You were in the photo. At the mine. Lovell laughed. Boy, you don't know what you're talking about. But Granger raised a hand to silence him, then looked Eli dead in the eye. I signed that contract, he said at last. I didn't know what they'd do to him. But you didn't stop it. No. The ranch fell quiet. Even the horses stilled. Eli turned the photo over, held it out. Then you finish what you started. Tell everyone. Burn the lie. Granger took the photo, looked down at it for a long time, then, slowly, nodded. Gather everyone, he said. This land was built on the backs of men like your father. It's time they knew. They gathered in the main yard, where branding smoke once choked the sky and men had wagered wages on horseflesh and whiskey, but today the air was solemn. Even the sun held back behind drifting clouds, as if it, too, was listening. Granger stood on the porch, photograph in hand, hat off. His voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it carried. It cracked a little, like old wood under weight. Some of you know the name Lu Sheng. Most don't. He came here from China with nothing but his back and his will. He worked the mines that gave us this land, and when he spoke up against the cruelty, they silenced him. I was there when they drew up the deal that sent him to his death. He paused, breath shaking. I didn't know the cost. I know it now. Gasps rose, glances darted, but Granger continued. This boy, Elias, his son, and the name I gave him, Granger, doesn't erase that blood. It binds it to mine. I won't carry this lie into my grave. He handed the photo to the foreman. Let it hang in the barn. Let every man see what built this ranch. Whispers turned to silence. A few men nodded. Others lowered their heads. Clay Murdoch stood at the back, arms folded, but for once his mouth stayed shut. The days that followed brought change, real change. Granger penned a public letter, printed in the Desert Gazette, acknowledging his role in Lu Sheng's death, and pledging a share of the ranch's profit toward the families of miners who died in that same collapse. Some called it weakness, others called it justice. Eli didn't call it anything, he just worked. But now he walked with a photo of his father tucked into the inside pocket of his vest. He rode Angel's last-born colt, a pale mare he named May after his mother. One evening, he found Clay near the creek, mending a busted water trough. The two hadn't spoken since the confession. "You got what you wanted," Clay said without looking up. "A name, a place, a story." Eli studied him. "Didn't want revenge, Clay, just the truth." Clay grunted. "Truth don't change what we did to you." "No," Eli said, "but maybe it changes what we do next." He tossed him a canteen and walked off into the dusk. Weeks turned into months, and the ranch stood taller not just in fences or cattle count, but in character. Eli's hands were still calloused, his shirt still plain, but now when he spoke, men listened. Not because he shouted, but because he didn't need to. Granger kept his word. He installed a brass plaque beside the bunkhouse door, "In honor of Lu Sheng and all who labored unseen." Eli never asked for it. He never even touched it. But every morning he looked at it before picking up his bridle. One day Granger handed him a ledger. "I want you to learn the numbers," he said. "You've earned more than a stall to sleep in." Eli opened the book with trembling fingers. "You want me in the office? I want you beside me." It wasn't just mentorship, it was legacy. And Granger, old and tired, knew the land would one day need new handsones that carried more than just muscle, but memory. Spring came early that year. The hills turned green faster than they had in decades. The air smelled of sage and second chances. On the first day of calving season, Eli stood at the edge of the pasture, watching May graze beneath the wide, blooming sky. A girl from town approached on horseback, a new schoolteacher, fresh from the east, curious about horses and stories. She asked about the plaque. Eli told her the truth, not just the polished version, but the rough, honest one. And when she said that must have been hard, he didn't shrug or look away. He just said, "It was, but the land remembers what men forget, and now so do we." She smiled. "You should write that down." He chuckled. "Maybe I will." The sky flared orange behind the distant hills. Somewhere a hawk cried. Somewhere a name long buried rose again, not as shame, but as story. A name is more than ink on paper or breath on wind. It's a weight, a promise, a bridge between what was and what must be. Eli Granger did not inherit the land. He earned it, not with fists or fury, but with quiet persistence, with the strength to carry both shame and truth without letting either rot the soul. In a land that often forgot the hands that built it, he became a reminder not just of Lu Sheng, but of every man who worked without thanks, every woman who mourned in silence, every child who grew up between borders drawn by other men's fears. He was mocked for his blood, then named for power. But in the end, he gave the name meaning, not the other way around. And that's the thing about justice in the West. It doesn't always ride in on a horse or end with a gun. Sometimes it comes slow on calloused feet, carrying a shovel, a ledger, and a memory. Sometimes justice is a boy brushing a blind mare, refusing to hate the world that bruised him. Sometimes it's a man who decides that the truth, however old, however painful, is still worth speaking. Black Ridge Ranch still stands, its fences painted, its past uncovered, and in the soft hush of dawn, when the horses stir and the wind whispers over the fields, you can almost hear it. A name once mocked, now spoken with pride.